It has been 30 days with the M3 Max MacBook Pro, and I'm not sure I'll ever need to buy a laptop ever again. But there are some problems, and as I've said before on this channel, there are a few key areas that define whether a good laptop is actually a good laptop. Today I want to show you what my experience has been like 30 days later with the M3 Max MacBook Pro, tell you how it scores in each of those key areas, and also a couple of regrets and problems that I've had with buying this machine. So to get what might be obvious to some watching this video out of the way, the M3 MacBook Pro is really only targeted at one very specific type of person, and that is someone whose current machine is using an Intel chip. Because truth be told, if you're using an M1 or M2 machine already, they are just as good as the M3s. Now the M3 is of course better than the M1 or M2, and there's certainly a case to argue that if you're pushing the M1 or M2 machines to its limits, then it is worth upgrading. But for the majority of people, it's an absolute no-brainer to purchase one of these to replace either an Intel laptop or even a desktop machine. Now I had an M2 MacBook Air and an M2 Max Mac Studio, so why do I upgrade? Two words: man maths. Now, man maths is that process that guys go through when something new and shiny comes out. We might not even need or even want it to begin with, but somehow our brain just subconsciously plots out what we need to happen for us to buy the thing that we don't want or need. Now in my case, I realized that I could sell my M2 Mac Studio and M2 MacBook Air, and that could almost pay for the M3 MacBook Pro with 35 gig of memory and a 2TB SSD. Now even though this machine was the best part of $4 grand, that would give me a machine that is more powerful than a Mac Studio with an M2 Ultra chip in, but one I could carry with me. So now back to those few key areas that define whether a good laptop is a good laptop, the first one of which is the performance. And I can't honestly think of any time in my entire life where I've bought a computer and it feels like it could be the last laptop I'll ever need to buy. And I really think this is true for some people. Now according to some benchmark tests, this M3 Max is as powerful as an M2 Ultra Mac Studio, and we're talking the fastest machine that Apple ever made as of just a few months ago. It's faster than their Mac Pros, which they used to sell for tens of thousands of pounds, and it's a freaking laptop. So for most people, it's going to take a really, really long time before you start to really push the limits of what this machine is capable of. Now I know a few people who still own the old school white MacBooks, and even more still rocking an Intel MacBook. Their performance is pretty awful, but people are still using them. Now the performance of this laptop is absolutely 5-star, incredible, and I could see one of these still being used a decade or 2 decades later without it slowing down. Now I also haven't heard the fan spin up even once through general use. It's something that I always used to hate with the old 16-inch MacBook Pro I used to have. I'd open Apple Notes whilst in a meeting, and suddenly I would have the noisiest laptop in the entire room. It wasn't cool. Well, I guess it was cool, but it wasn't cool at all for me. And not just the performance, but the battery life is crazy good. I'm getting over 12 hours of usage on a single charge. Literally, on days where I charge the laptop overnight and I sit down, I use it solidly, basically for the whole day, right through into midnight. It lasts so well. Now, I recently reviewed an Intel laptop, and I was genuinely impressed and surprised that it could last 7 hours or so, but 12 hours. Crazy good. And it just goes to show how, not just how powerful the M3 chips are, but also how power efficient these chips are too. Now with the MacBook Pro, I am so happy to have the additional HDMI 2.1 ports and a full SD card slot on the side, in addition to 3 USB-C ports. Got one on this side, 2 on the other side. Now I have a really small security key that I sometimes need to carry around with me, and it's nice to be able to plug that into my Mac without literally halving the number of available USB-C ports like it did with the MacBook Air that only had 2 slots on it. And the fact it has a HDMI 2.1 port means that it can run this ginormous 57-inch screen at a huge, I think it's 7680 by 2160 resolution at 120 Hz. Now the only issue is that the screens I'm using don't have USB-C or Thunderbolt, so I'm considering getting a docking station so I don't need to hook up power every single time. And the built-in SD card slot means I no longer have to carry around these flipping dongles with me to offload footage from my camera everywhere I go. Speaking of connectivity, I recently came across a way that I can use any other screen as an additional screen. I mean any other screen. Now it's an app called Duet Display, and I can use an iPad or an Android tablet or even a whole separate PC or a Mac as an additional screen. So this is kind of like Apple Sidecar, where you can just use your iPad as a second monitor, but it works on anything. Now, I liked it so much that I asked if they would be interested in sponsoring this video, and they said yes, so thank you very much. And there'll be a link down below if you're interested in checking this out for yourself. But it's basically just a case of installing the client on each machine, and then you can choose which device you want to use, and you can either extend or mirror that machine's screen. Now, this also means it's a way for you to remotely control your machine from anywhere in the world as well. But for most people, particularly if you're working from like a laptop like this, it is nice to be able to just make use of any additional or bigger or extra screens that you have around you. Like, even if it's just you can throw a Spotify playlist up on a separate monitor whilst you're working away without it interfering with what you're doing. So yeah, check it out. Use the link down below. A huge thank you for Duet for sponsoring this portion of the video. And now on with the video. But it's not just about the specs and the performance and the ports. A lot of what makes a good laptop is just the overall experience. Now, of course, you have the whole like Apple ecosystem experience. If you're kind of into that, you get seamless copy and paste, handoff for calls and texts and photos. I can use my iPad as a second screen. I can even push my mouse onto the iPad and use my Mac's keyboard and mouse to control the iPad, which is pretty cool. Now, I am not sure why, but the webcam in these MacBooks still really average, like at best, but you can use continuity camera with an iPhone for much better video quality. It's just a real shame they can't fit like an iPhone camera into this kind of top part of the screen. And that 120Hz ProMotion display is so nice. It is so bright, you can easily see this on a bright sunny day, like far better than the MacBook Air that I was using before. And it just looks stunning. Like, you do have that notch in the top of the screen, which seems pretty big considering there's no Face ID on the Mac. Something else that would have been nice to have. But I love like the rounded edges, and you do kind of forget about the notch after a while. Now, the good news is that if you do watch like movies full screen, you don't see any of that notch due to the aspect ratio. So honestly, it's not really much of a problem that I've experienced. Now, the other solution would be to do something like Lenovo did with their Legion laptop that I reviewed recently, which has the notch actually like sticking out the top of the screen instead, which also worked pretty well. I didn't really have a problem with doing it either way. Now, we'll just mention one thing briefly, because I keep seeing people mention and asking the question like, okay, so the matte black finish to me looks mostly matte black. Like, I guess it's not quite matte black. It's like a very dark gray, I guess. But what it is better at hiding the fingerprints than the Midnight M2 MacBook Airs, which really showed up fingerprints, like actually quite badly. Now, the MacBook Pro doesn't have this problem, which I'm really glad to see. But even still, I ended up slapping a dbrand skin onto my latest MacBook Air just to like hide the fingerprints, and I kind of liked it. And I have these two dbrand skins for the MacBook Pro. I just can't decide which one to use. Which one do you think? Like, I love the orange, but is it too much, or is it like the lighter kind of two-tone color nicer? Maybe let me know down in the comments below, and I will also link down to where you can get these skins for yourself in the comments below. But yeah, can't decide. Now, the one area that I can speak from experience though when owning a Mac is the support experience. And this is as much a part of the puzzle of like any of the other categories. Now, over my years of owning Macs, I've owned pretty much all of them. I think the only one I've never owned before is the desktop Mac Pros, because they were just insanely expensive. But what has been the same has been their support experience. Now, don't get me wrong, I've rarely needed to speak to Apple about problems with my Macs, but when I have, they've really knocked it out of the park. Like, I've had Apple replace a 3-year-old laptop with a brand new model under warranty because they didn't sell the one that I was having problems with. Like, they literally gifted me a brand new machine with a brand new warranty because of problems I was having on a 3-year-old model. Crazy good. And Apple is pretty much the only place you can buy a machine from, or still buy a machine from nowadays, and then go and walk into a store and get a really good level of customer service. Like Lenovo, Dell, HP, you're basically stuck with online or telephone only, where you have to like ship it in, wait a couple of weeks, and then maybe get it back. Unless you go to Best Buy or another store, who again, they're all pretty limited with being able to actually solve your problem. But with all of the good things, the one piece of the puzzle which Apple, unsurprisingly I guess, falls flat on its face is upgradability. Because you literally cannot upgrade these machines. Memory is soldered on, storage is soldered on. Apple even made a special kind of screw that needs a special matching kind of screwdriver so you can open one of these machines up. And even when you do, it is impossible to add or upgrade basically beyond the spec that you've already paid for. And if that was any other regular Windows or Intel kind of machine, that would kind of suck. But given the performance of this machine, like I said earlier, I'm not sure I'll ever need to look at upgrading anything about this machine unless the whole world turns to like AI and suddenly everyone needs 100 gig of memory in their laptops, which actually might happen someday. But if anything, the main thing I believe you should be able to upgrade yourself would be the storage, because as the years go on, of course you're going to store more and more data and more photos and videos, but also it gets cheaper and cheaper to buy storage. As an example, you can currently buy an 8TB M2 SSD for £1,000, but to go from 1TB to 8TB on the Apple Store for a MacBook Pro, it is more than double the cost at like 2,200, I believe it is, to upgrade. But with that said, I use a lot of cloud storage. So the only reason I bought the 2TB of storage is because of the large video files that I work with. Once I'm done with those, they just get offloaded to cloud storage anyway. So yeah, upgradability is still an issue, as is the ability to repair the machine. I'm all for being able to repair the machine yourself. But Apple has something else to their advantage, that these machines just hold their value so well. Like, I literally just sold my M2 Max Mac Studio and basically got back what I paid for it. And the prices for the M2 MacBook Airs are also really strong. I'm only losing 100 or 200 pounds here and there when I sell those machines. So if you ever do need to upgrade, kind of like I've done with my mammoths here, you can likely do so, selling your old stuff, buying the new one without losing too much from your original purchase price. I just wish Apple didn't put such a price premium on those memory and storage upgrades. So I will mark this down as a bit of a failure on Apple's parts, and that would technically mean that this MacBook Pro doesn't hit all of the 5 areas that it needs to hit for me to claim it as a, a good laptop. But honestly, it just doesn't feel right. Like, the MacBook Pro is a stunning example of what a great laptop should look like. It's light, it's thin, it's portable, fast, powerful, efficient, and I for one can't see me needing to upgrade or replace this machine for a very long time, unless my man maths thing happens, which probably will happen next year. But I do have some regrets, and hopefully these may help you if you are considering an upgrade, to help you really think through what you might be committing to. Now, like I said, I'm coming from an M2 MacBook Air, and for the most part, it did everything I needed a laptop to do, like email, browsing, YouTube, messaging, all the good stuff. I don't do a huge amount of video editing because I now have a team that takes care of that nowadays, but what I do regret is that the MacBook Air was actually considerably lighter. Like, when I'm sat on the sofa and catching up on emails in the evening, it was a lot more comfortable to use over the MacBook Pro. Now, if I'm going to meetings, traveling, it's also, again, noticeably heavier. And if you're the kind of person who likes to travel light, this alone can add quite a bit of bulk and weight to your bag. And secondly, having a laptop does introduce some problems into my overall setup. Now, I love these ultra wide screens, yet none of them have direct support for USB-C or Thunderbolt 4. So for me to use them, I have to either plug them in via HDMI and then find a power cable, or I'm gonna have to pull out my trusty docking station I used to use, which is just yet another thing on my whole desktop setup that I need to power, more heat's generated from it. I don't necessarily need it. And I'm actually really enjoying using the Windows gaming PC that I built recently. It works flawlessly with the ultra wide screen, and it has a 2.5 gig Ethernet port to quickly upload footage to my NAS drive as well. And then there is another thing that the MacBook fails at. Now, this is one of the most powerful laptops that money can buy, and it's potentially capable of running some of the best games, but it is a Mac, and hardly anybody develops games for a Mac. Now, Apple did talk a load about gaming in their M3 launch event, and perhaps that will make game developers want to develop on the Apple platform. I'm not sure. I'd love to see Apple bringing their power and efficiency over to the gaming industry. I really think they have the potential to take the whole gaming industry to new levels, but potentially damaging quite a lot of the PC gaming brands in the process. I mean, look at the size of the graphics card I recently installed into my new PC. Or actually, in fact, the box for the graphics card alone is pretty much the same size as the box for the MacBook Pro. It's pretty incredible, the difference between this. Now, I am super interested in checking out other brands' laptops, including loads of Windows machines. I've also heard a lot of noise recently around the new Snapdragon chips coming out in 2024, which look like they have the potential to at least match Apple Silicon chips, but on Windows laptops. So I am all for that. I'm all for competition. It's about time someone leveled the playing field. But until the next one, bye-bye.